Hello, I'm Larry Yatch, former Navy SEAL and founder of PlanSight. I am so excited to have you in this class. I can't wait to share these hard earned lessons. I mean, these lessons were learned on the battlefields of Iraq and through over 12 years of entrepreneurship, both starting and running my own successful businesses, as well as over 7 years consulting in up to billion-dollar companies. These lessons are all about teams, not only how to produce and function on teams, but how to lead the teams. And if there's one thing that I learned as an officer in the SEAL teams, it's that if you're going to lead high performing people, and just take a minute to think about this, as an officer in the SEALs, especially as a junior officer, I had to go into an environment where I had my enlisted SEALs, and they knew to the core of their being that they were stronger than me. They knew that they were smarter than me. And most importantly, most of them had significantly more experience than I did. Imagine how hard it is to lead in an environment like that. An environment where the Navy spent millions of dollars to ensure that these men know to the core of their being, if it's humanly possible, they can do it. Do you think they'd leave a lot of room for me to make mistakes, to be ineffective? And even more important than that is the mistakes that I make as their leader could cost them their lives. In order to operate in that type of environment, the first and most important thing I had to do to get their attention, keep it, was to answer the question, why? Why was I asking them to do what I was asking them to do? And because you're taking your time, you've used your hard-earned money, and you're taking your time to learn these lessons, I'm going to treat you the exact same way I treat my SEALs, making the assumption that you're an above-average performer, that you're a high-functioning individual. And I want to answer that same question for you. Why? Why should you take this course? Why should you learn these lessons? Well, with that, I want to tell you a story. One of the common questions I get is, was there any time you wanted to quit during BUDS? BUDS stands for Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training, and it's our basic training. It's a 6-month program with over a month in the front that is honestly considered the hardest military training in the world. My class started with 135 guys, and 6 months later, we graduated with 11 of those original 135. That's an over 90% attrition rate, and the vast majority of those that didn't make it quit because the training was way too hard. And throughout my entire 6 months in that program, there was honestly no time that I ever wanted to quit. But there was one time when I just wanted it all to stop, when I just was fed up with it. And oddly enough, that was only 2 weeks from graduation. The last month of training is held out at San Clemente Island, which is 25 miles past Catalina Island, which is off the coast of Southern California. And as soon as you land on this island, after 5 months of the hardest training in the world, the instructors greet you in the airplane saying, nobody can hear you scream anymore. All of a sudden, a lot of the rules that were held on the strand aren't really adhered to anymore because there's no prying eyes, no media cameras to record what they do. And so the training just gets even more difficult. And it was during one of these evolutions that I learned a very critical lesson. About 2 weeks from graduation, we're sitting there preparing for a swim, an open ocean 5-mile swim the next morning. So we're up late prepping all of our gear. And all of a sudden we get called out by one of the instructors. And the instructor says that he caught one of our classmates in the chow hall, and that we knew after hours we weren't allowed in the chow hall. So we had to, in their words, pay the man. And so what happened is they told us to strip down naked, and we piled all of our clothes in a big pile in the big cold parking lot. And I was going through this training in late March, early May. So it was absolutely freezing out there. And there's this light drizzle. So it's just that bone chilling cold right by the ocean. And we had to lay with our arms out in a cross position on the parking lot, head to toe, with those all the rest of our classmates, while they sprayed us with a fire hose. We just laid there in the concrete naked, freezing cold, for what seemed like forever as they sprayed it. And then all of a sudden the instructor would say, okay, you've got 2 minutes to get your socks on. So you run up, run into the pile, dig through the pile of clothes, try and get your socks on, and then go lay down. And if you got all the socks on, the whole class got their socks on and laid down before the 2 minutes were up, they'd spray us with the fire hose some more, and then they'd say, okay, get your skivvies on. So you'd run up, and you'd try and dig through the pile, and if you didn't make the time, they would tell you to hit the surf. So in whatever state you were in, you had to run the 200 meters down this kind of rocky dirt road, down to the sand, through the surf, jump into the ocean, roll in the sand, covered from head to toe, run back up to the beach, strip off your clothes, put it on the pile, and lay back down in the parking lot while they sprayed all the sand off you with the fire hoses, and then it started over again. Now this went on for 2 hours. And then eventually everyone got fully dressed. And they said as soon as you got fully dressed, we were done. So everyone got dressed, and now it's 1:30 in the morning, and we go back to continue to prepare for this swim. And it couldn't have been more than 45 minutes, maybe an hour later, and we're exhausted at this point, when all of a sudden we heard the same noise, muster out in the grinder. So out we ran, and there was the same instructor saying, I can't believe it. After everything you guys just went through, we found another one of your classmates in the chow hall. Guess what? It's starting all over again. There we go, stripped down naked, freezing cold, laying in that cross position, and off we go into the same evolution. About 45 minutes into this one, I'm running down through that rocky road down to the surf, and I am just done. Like, after all of this, I just was losing motivation. I just didn't want to do this anymore. Now, there's a key difference. I didn't want to quit. Like, I wasn't thinking about ringing the bell, but for the first time in my entire chunk of training, I was just not excited. I didn't want to be there anymore. And it was in that moment of weakness that I learned one of my most important lessons. So there I am, feeling the lowest I've ever felt in the entire training, absolutely done, spent, no energy, did not want to go on anymore. And I look up and I see Seaman Andrews, who was in my boat crew from the very beginning of training, and he's running up. And at this point, I had some underwear on and my socks on. And as I'm running down, he's got nothing but one sock on. And every time he takes a step, he's leaving a bloody footprint on the rocks from over 4 hours of running up and down barefoot through this thing. And at that moment, he looked a hell of a lot more pathetic than I felt at that moment. And in that moment, I decided to, instead of focus on my own pain and suffering, to try and lift his spirits, to focus out on him. So I look at him, I flash this huge grin, I throw up my hand, he gets me a high five, and I remember seeing him like snap out of it, out of his misery, look at me, see my huge grin, he got a big grin, hit a high five, and off we ran. And in that moment, I went from having no energy, not wanting to go on, no motivation, to have this warm feeling inside of me. And the rest of the evolution, I can't even remember. Burned right through it. Next thing you know, we get through the next evolution into training, and I graduate. The lesson in that is all about honor. Honor is living to a code of behavior in which the good of the team comes before the good of the self. Now, when you're focusing on yourself, it's very easy to lose motivation, lose drive. But as soon as you focus out and stop being internally motivated, where you're the victim in this whole situation, and begin to take control, take action, you are able to have purpose. Right? My purpose in that moment became motivating one of my friends and teammates. And as soon as I saw him light up, I felt fulfilled. And that warm heat of fulfillment is what sustained me as I went on through that training. So how does this apply to teams and leadership? This is all about giving you the purpose behind a team. Now, there's all sorts of purposes behind teams. We'll go through all sorts of distinctions and definitions and actions and behaviors. these techniques, mindset, structures. We'll go through all of that in this class, and that information is absolutely top notch. It is going to be the best information you've ever seen. But I think it's much more important in this moment for you to understand why it's important to have a team. The purpose behind a team, the purpose behind learning this stuff. Teams are all about coordinating action with others to reach a desired future situation. But the purpose behind teams, that's the way they work, or the reason that you need a team, is to work together to create a different future. But the purpose, the real reason behind it, is, I think, a lot more personal. Think of the worst situation you've ever been in, the darkest moment that you've been in. Now, I'm going to pause here because I really want you to grasp onto this moment. Just like me running down that beach, I was in absolute misery and hell. It was the darkest I'd been in my 6 months of this horrible training. Think back to your buds, your dark moment. Now, the purpose of a team is to get you out of those dark moments. Those dark moments are caused when we feel isolated, when we feel alone, when we feel that we have no control over our situation. And the hardcore purpose of a team is to be the support, to be the drive, to get us out of those dark moments. That's what gives us not only the ability, but the reason to keep going on. And these teams are universal. The principles we're going to talk about, this purpose, is universal. It doesn't matter if we're talking about the team of spouses or partners. We're not just talking about a father and a son, or a mother and a daughter. We're not only talking about work. Where in your career or in your job, you rely on others to create a different future situation. All of these things are the same. The purpose of each one of these teams is, at the deepest level, give us the ability to get a hand up, a light at the end of the tunnel out of any of the dark moments we are in. And so that's the purpose. The purpose of team is to be able to ensure that not only can we get out of the dark spaces, but once we're out of dark spaces, the only way we get to the absolute beautiful light that we want to get to is based on our ability to coordinate action with others. And so that's what you're going to learn in this course. You're going to learn the absolute best techniques, procedures, mindsets, actions, behaviors, structures that enabled me to not only be on, but be very effective on, eventually lead, and ultimately create exceptionally high-functioning teams. And it's only through your ability to coordinate actions that you can actually fulfill all of the desires of your life. So what you're going to learn in these next lessons are really foundational for you to have the success that you want. And I can't be prouder that you've trusted me with teaching you these absolutely critical life skills. So I hope someday you think of me and you're Seaman Andrews, right? When you're running up this beach and you're in your dark moment, you remember this lesson, you remember these things that you're going to learn over the next number of weeks, and you use them first to get out of that hole, and then to get to the light, the future that you want. Thank you for joining us, and I can't wait to see the results and the benefits that you get out of these next lessons. I'll see you in the next lesson.